Hello, welcome to the GC Sunscast, the only show that discusses the real issues at the Gold Coast Suns from a Gold Coast perspective. This is the round 16 edition. I'm your host Shane, and joining me as always is Tom. How are you, Tom?
Yeah, g'day Shane. How are you this week?
Yeah, good. Yourself?
Yeah. Well, as usual, no win to talk about, but transition year and watching another game on the weekend where you can see cracks of light in the end of the tunnel, maybe, but still a long way to go, isn't there?
Yeah, not too much joy in the last 10 weeks for Gold Coast Suns fans, but let's try and break it down and find some, as you say, cracks of light to look forward to and draw something for the coming seasons. So North Melbourne kicked 14 goals, 11.95 and defeated Gold Coast 8 goals, 10.58 to win by 37 points. Now, Brodie was probably the talking point of the game. He came back with 24 disposals and 5 clearances. So it was a real solid performance from Brodie, and he didn't rack up huge numbers, but he was very serviceable, and I thought he played a really good role. What do you reckon?
Yeah, I agree. Look, he played like a second-year player, though. 24 touches it's pretty sure it's by far and away his best, and it was great to see. It wasn't just at the centre clearances where he is the most effective mid that we've got. It was also at the stoppages, which is where we want to be dominating, especially if we're not actually dominating in the hitouts. Isn't it funny to see games where we've smashed them in the hitouts, but we've lost the clearances, and then when we bring in a guy like Brodie and we bring back Lyons after he was dropped for a couple of games, suddenly we're either winning the clearances or we're halving it, doing very well. We lost the centre clearances and we won the stoppages, so we've halved it in that game. Hasn't affected the result, but gee, having Brodie in the team does make a difference to that particular stat line.
Yeah, like you said, the stoppages and clearances, we are starting to win. So despite not having that A-grade midfielder in the side, the midfield is getting the job done. It just seems to be the use of the ball. The disposal efficiency is the worst in the league in the AFL. We're way down the bottom, and not just by a couple of points. It's a fair chunk of percentage that we're behind the next worst side. But one person that wasn't affected by disposal efficiency was the bloke playing his 100th game. Rory Thompson had 100% disposal efficiency and a team high 8 1%ers. So he actually had one of the best games he's had, and it was a real solid contribution for the Gold Coast Suns.
Well, there was another metric that he had 100%, and that was time on ground. He hasn't put a foot wrong. He had 4 goals kicked on him by Ben Brown, but I don't put any of those on him. That was generally Brown's excellent play, the great ball that North gave him, the great supply early, and Thompson rallied the troops and said, right, we've got to stop this, and Brown was pretty much taken out of the contest after that first quarter. Even though, as I said, it wasn't necessarily Thompson's fault. There was one free kick he gave away that led to a goal. He's really the heart and soul of that back line. Stephen May is a great leader and a captain, but with Rory Thompson playing this well after having a few injury-interrupted seasons, it's really great to see, and he's finally got there to make the big milestone.
Yeah, it's good to have one of the originals come through with the 100 games, so hopefully in the future there'll be more Thompsons from the Rory line playing for us.
Exactly, yeah. Something to think about.
Yeah, so there were no reserves games for the week. The reserve side had the bye, but we have the Allies game that was played last week. It was the last Allies game, and who did they play again, Tom?
They played against Western Australia. It was a midweek game. They did a double header for the final 2 games. So the curtain raiser was Allies versus Western Australia, and you have to say Western Australia. Even though they had a pretty poor start to the tournament, they finished it pretty well with a couple of wins. And the Allies were the opposite, started the tournament really well. and then sort of closed it out with a few losses. But the game itself was very willing. Both teams were in it. The Western Australia, they were playing as well as any other team in the comp. I think with them, because of the way the whole competition is structured, they're playing away a lot. And, when you're not playing in front of a home crowd, that could be the difference between winning and losing. So after their poor start to the tournament, they've pulled together a really, really high-quality game. The Allies had some terrific players. I can't sort of, proceed without saying Bailey Scott is a really, really good player. And he's just getting better and better. We're going to see him in the next few weeks in the NEFL. And he'll slot straight in and probably be one of the best on ground straight away. He was best on ground for 4 games straight for the Allies, and he was in the discussion for the Lark medal, which eventually went to Sam Walsh. And Sam Walsh played in a Vic Metro team that didn't win anything. Caleb Graham played in place of Dirk Conan. He wasn't brilliant, but just really flashed a lot of potential.
Yeah, I watched a good portion of that Allies versus WA game, and Bailey Scott looks a real player. I did say the other week that I've heard reports from friends of the family that they're keen for Bailey Scott to stay on the Gold Coast, and that would be great news, especially after what I saw him do. He's got a tank. He can play inside. He can play outside. He's a real good player. And once he develops and starts playing some AFL games, he's going to be a star for the Suns.
Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't agree more. I was really impressed by the way that he was able to, play where he needed to play for the team. So he couldn't just sort of, get comfortable sitting in a forward pocket or anything like that. He went forward, he went back, he played through the middle. He played a real team game. He didn't try and blaze away himself all the time. He really looked out for teammates. He supported them, and he got them in the right places. When a really influential player is on the field, when he's everything that he does is assured. He's playing teammates to advantage into space, and then backing up with Shepherds and backing up with being available to have the ball passed back to him and all that kind of stuff. So. And I think he'd be virtually AFL ready, certainly NEFL ready.
Something that happened on the weekend was Brisbane Lions won a game. Now, we're not a Brisbane Lions podcast, but I will discuss this when it is relevant to the Gold Coast Suns, and that is because now Gold Coast Suns are second bottom on the ladder. This means that if we stay in this position for the rest of the year, we are going to collect pick 2. And if Tom Lynch leaves and we are awarded a first round priority pick because we don't match, we'll have pick 2 and pick 3 going into the draft. Now, that's quite a draft haul in what is touted as having some really good top end talent. One of the picks that's been touted a lot is a guy called Lukosius. He has been touted as a number 1 pick, but it seems more and more recently, Walsh, was it? From Vic Metro.
That's right.
He seems to be the one that's being touted as number 1 pick now, but I think that's purely because of Carlton's needs of securing some quality midfielders just like ours. But if we do lose Tom Lynch, Jack Lukosius would not be a bad pick for our club. Would hopefully really slot well into that half forward role, giving 2 Meter Peter the ability to stay forward and kick goals. So what did you take from the SA and the Metro game, Vic Metro game?
Look, Isaac Rankin, best player on the field. He kicked 3 goals, 2 by quarter time, and it should have been 5 goals. You could say he's unlucky there with that. If he works on his set shots for goal, because he certainly doesn't have to work on his goals from off the ground or snapping around the corner or banging them from 50. He ended up with 5 goals for the game, and he was the difference between the two teams. Vic Metro, they're no slouches. He was Isaac Rankin was amazing, and Lukosius had a bit of a quiet game. He didn't. I mean, he's obviously shown everybody what he's capable of. What he did do really well, Lukosius, was play around the game. Like he played at multiple positions and influenced the game. That's for sure. Perhaps the fact that South Australia had so many good players. That's probably why Lukosius didn't come to the fore so much, and Rankin just stole the show. If those three top three picks, I think it's them and Daylight. I don't think there's anybody else who sort of comes into the. People have suggested perhaps Bailey Smith, but I think he's sort of the next three.
I didn't see the King incident.
Yeah, so his brother's done an ACL, but he was kicking bags of 8 and 10 in the high, because as you know the high school competition kind of it attracts a lot of attention from your draft, from your scouts and all that kind of stuff. The recruiters are all sort of really super interested, and there is a bit of a push for somebody to select both brothers. And the Suns are probably the best place to do that. What do you think about that idea?
No, it doesn't sit well with me, especially if we're going to have picks 2 and 3. Maybe if we had picks 5 and 6. But having picks 2 and 3, I would actually even be tempted to ignore any trade offers from Adelaide and go after Lukosius and Rankin. Bring the 2 South Australians up to Queensland, and it just increases your chances of retention if they're at least with someone that they know, and it just helps bring the comfort to them, and so they don't get too homesick. So I think that could be a really good trade scenario. That's assuming Carlton take Walsh with their first pick, though. Otherwise, I'd very much like to see Walsh at the Suns. There does seem to be a push for inside mids or big-bodied mids for the Suns. I'm not sure if that's a real necessity. We have been drafting a lot of midfielders, especially in the last few years, and they're just still going through the process of getting games under their body and bulking up a bit. So once those players can, such as Brodie and Scrimshaw, they're the blokes that we should be expecting to come into our midfield in the next few years. Not draftees and kids that are going to take another couple of years to develop. They can't just come straight in and perform. So,
yeah, I totally agree with you. There are. I mean, I think Rankin would be AFL ready, but he's not going to change our fortunes. He's going to be like an Ainsworth. He's going to come in. I mean, Ben Ainsworth has never played NEFL. Do you realise this? He's been regarded as an AFL talent from the beginning, and he's either played or been out injured and then come straight back into the side. So, if someone like a Rankin, you'd imagine we'd find room for him in our forward line and develop him from there. If you're going to compare Rankin, what is he? He to me, Rankin is another Ackermanis, and there hasn't been another Ackermanis. So that's his ceiling, and he's probably going to have to learn his trade sitting in the forward pocket. But he will end up being a gun midfielder, and I hope we get him more than any other player. As you say, there is things do rely on us coming 17th for this to eventuate. There is an indicative draft order on the AFL website, and it's a couple of weeks old. So the Gold Coast are now in second spot because Brisbane and St Kilda are winning. And, of course, because we lost against St Kilda, we do have a game coming up against Brisbane in round 22, which may actually determine that final spot.
Well, that's enough for the discussion on next year's draft crop. We are hoping to have a special episode airing in the next few weeks to discuss that even more. But for now, let's look at the injury list for round 17. The Gold Coast Suns have Rosa, Hanley, and Fiorini listed as tests. So they've also stated those boys will be coming back through the NEFL. So we can't expect any of those changes into the side to play Essendon. Ainsworth is listed as 1 week, just a niggling leg injury, keeping him out. Day looks to be gone for the season after they've decided to go ahead with shoulder Rico. And May suffered a hit in the game against North Melbourne to his hip. It looked like he may have done a hip flexor, but it seems to be coming up all good now, so it probably was just a corky or something.
Yeah, well, look, as far as Day is concerned, you probably prefer for him to have his operation. The injury itself looked bad, but it didn't seem to be as bad. And he certainly didn't seem to think there was that much wrong with it. But having the operation is going to mean that he's going to have another off season where he's in rehab. But with luck, most of the rehab will be sort of before the end of the AFL finals, So he will probably have a proper preseason, and that's could only be a good thing.
Well, the other big piece of news was not players but staff leaving the club at the end of this year. It's Lovell and Primus. They haven't been guaranteed contracts for this year and will be pushed out the door. Lovell has been part of the initial build as an assistant coach since the club started, and Primus is 6 years into his life as a Gold Coast Sun assistant after being sacked from the Port Adelaide top job back in 2011, I think it was, when Gold Coast beat them. It was that year.
Yeah, yes, that's right. That's right. He did us a favour there, didn't he? We haven't been able to beat them since with him, so he might actually be the bogey.
So we're going to be having some new coaching staff coming on board. Now, let's speculate as to who that might be. I mean, we could be having Malcheski moving up from the NEFL coach into a backline role. There's been talk about, getting a dream team of Choco Williams or Paul Roos or Michael Voss back up here. And then we've also got to look at some more realistic targets, like other assistant coaches out of contract at other clubs. You've got Kingsley, Hamill, McPhee and Gilby all out of contract over at St Kilda. At least they're the ones that have been publicised. We could be looking at someone like a Robert Harvey from Collingwood, or one of the many assistant coaches at Sydney. There might be one or two that are out of contract and willing to move up to the Gold Coast.
Yeah, I mean, it'll be very interesting to see the types of names that are bandied around, because at this stage of the year, all of the teams that are in finals contention, they're not, they're not concentrating on who they're going to, hire for next year. So, being in the gun seat here is an advantage we've got. And it's good to let them know, I mean, I think Primus will probably, he seems to be the kind of guy who he'll probably be happy to go back and coach somewhere in the second tier level, or be an assistant coach somewhere where they feel like they can use his services. I don't think he's been terrible. Lovell's probably the guy that the players will miss the most, but then again, it'd be good for his career. So happy for those two guys to have this amount of time to work out what they'll do. Then again, they may even get offered jobs in the quaffle. These aren't all out of the question. As far as who we pick, I tend to think someone like a Robert Harvey or a Michael Voss would be really great. Voss has got the coaching experience, and Robert Harvey's just a really great guy. He was great, played through several generations, and you look at the work that he's done with Collingwood. Maybe getting in someone from Sydney will be sort of a way for Dew to sort of feel like he's got Malcheski already with the club, and George Stone, but maybe just another person that's like a Dew hire that he knows he can work with. But certainly there's 3 or 4 places that need to be replaced. What do you think?
Yeah, definitely. I think every position's probably up for grabs. There's still a bit of surprise over Prescott maintaining his position, we believe. Obviously, it's still early days, so that could change. But considering the forward line's been pretty woeful over the last few years, that's always an issue considering, and Prescott is the forward line coach. But we'll just have to wait and see, and we'll know more at the end of the year. We've had a couple of Facebook questions come through this week, and there's some really good ones. So let's start with the first one. Bruce Tucker says, "Hi Shane, love the podcast. We all know that this year is a transition year to new coach, administration and other key staff, but I'd like to know your thoughts on what specific actions Dew might be working on to improve the team behind closed doors and how you think it's tracking for next year." So that's a really deep question, something I don't think we can answer. I have tried to reach out to the club, but haven't had any luck getting anything back yet. So I think we'll just have to speculate here, Tom. The first thing we can go on is from our game plan early on in the season. It was a rebound it out of half-back, get it into the forward line, and then have our forwards shut it down. Going on that game plan, we can speculate that over the preseason and the start of this year at least, they were focusing on the basics. So 1%ers and tackles, two-way running. And two-way running isn't something we had associated with the Suns for the last few years, is it?
No, that's one of the major improvements, and I don't think you can just sort of, I don't think Eade was ignoring it, but Dew's obviously said, look, you've got to start doing it, and that forward pressure. Well, Darcy McPherson was a great exponent of it, but unfortunately he's gone for the year. And Sam Day was doing a good job of leading the second tall defender well away from Lynch, so Lynch could actually, you saw it in the Carlton game, and Lynch kicked 8 goals. Sam Day wasn't within 50 metres of Lynch for most of that time, and I wouldn't be surprised if Sam Day put the most kilometres on the board, if not of any player, but certainly of anyone in the forward line, because that's what he was doing. He was leading up for the ball. The ball would go sailing over his head into the Lynch direction and goal, It wasn't a bad game plan, but oppositions soon saw what was going on and they've successfully shut it down. So where's plan B?
Yeah. Well, the fatigue and the travel, I think, really changed up our game plan a bit. The players were too tired to carry that sort of style out, and they have tried to change that game plan now and focus more on changing directions with switches, and it's been talked about having different running patterns as well, but not being afraid to switch things up. I mean, they're obviously working on decision making, and with that also comes disposal efficiency, and at this stage we're probably not seeing the benefits of that just yet. I mean, how could they be improving their decision making and disposal efficiency? Well, disposal efficiency is really only going to be improved with practice. Just practice. I mean, that's how players, some of the great goal kickers of our game, from Tony Lockett and Wayne Carey, they just do nothing but practice kicking the football into the goals. So that skill can be related to kicking to a teammate or handballing out. Is there anything else they could be doing to improve their disposal efficiency and decision making?
Well, disposal efficiency, as you say, it's their basic skills, aren't they? And I think Dew did say earlier this year that he wished young fellas would spend less time in front of the computer. I think he was more talking about what 14 or 15-year-olds do these days, because when they become 19, 20-year-old AFL players, they don't necessarily have the same skill level as the previous generations who didn't spend so much time in front of an Xbox. So just an observation. I think
players coming into the competition without much skills because they are spending too much time playing video games. So first of all, no Xbox. I'm a PlayStation fanboy all the way, but we've had things like Nintendo and PlayStation in households since the mid-90s. That's 20 odd years ago. So why is it only affecting them now? I don't buy into that situation.
I think it's intergenerational, isn't it? The Jew is not that much older than his oldest players, but he's a whole generation older than his youngest players. He's old enough to be their dad, and that's probably quite unusual for him. And he's come out and said it. I don't know that it's got any essence of truth, but what I think behind that is the fact that in past generations, even the least talented players knew that they had to have sharp ball skills and they had to have the fundamentals down pat, because otherwise you get dropped. And with the games that have just been destroyed by basic skill errors, because our backline can't even organise itself to get out of defensive 50 by hand, and we just have to keep kicking the ball to the halfback flank or the wing and turn the ball over. Well, you don't have to run it out of defensive 50 all the time, but when we do run it out of defensive 50, and this is where we miss guys like Kolajasny, we just look like dynamite when we run through the middle chain of hand passes, and it's great. But because we can't get the basic skill, these very simple, you handball the ball to where the player is running into space so that they don't have to bloody stop. And we just see it every week, and I just don't know what's behind it. I don't know why we can't seem to be the team to be able to sort of pull off these amazing hand passes, that no look hand passes or whatever. Because whenever we do try and do that, suddenly we're turning the ball over, and it's usually Aaron Hall who does it, but he seems to have been teaching a few of the younger blokes how to do it as well. So, but yeah, I admit because it relates to the question, don't think there's any truth in it. It does just seem to be the fact that our particular program for the preseason had us going really well. And for some reason, these skill errors have come in, and there's probably pressure more than anything. So learning how to deal with it, well, they've got a whole 6 months off after the end of next month, so see what they do with it then.
So moving on to our next question, it's from Jeffrey Dean. It's probably more of a comment than a question. Hi Shane, Jew has the makings of a top 6 side, but it's nice to hear constructive criticism from our not fans, double smiley face. So that's a nice little jibe there at the supporters from other clubs, that Suns fans constantly have to put up with comments regarding our club and where we're sitting. As far as the makings of a top 6 side, I guess you could say that. I think we're probably a quarter of a list short, but hopefully that will be corrected over the next off-season, maybe 2 off-seasons. But there's a nice bunch of players sitting there that could definitely be top 6 best 22 sides.
Yeah, I agree. Look, I like every player on our list. I don't think we've got an untalented list like some commentators suggest. The problem is that we've just got this massive chunk of players between the age of 18 and 23, or who haven't even had their 23rd birthdays yet. And then there's a handful of players who are foundation players or near to foundation players who were sort of recruited in that first couple of years. And then there's a handful of older guys who were free agency or trade pickups who are all about to turn 30. So, or they've already turned 30. So what to me, what's lacking is the 27 and 28-year-olds that every other club has, and they're in the prime of their career, and they have 10 years of footy in their legs. They've got between 100 and 200 games in their legs, and they're just mature players who we don't have one of them out of 45 players. We have none, and we've got all these 18-year-olds in the current team that's playing, and you just can't expect to win games with so many. I mean, they're doing well. Look, Ballard and Crossley and Heron and Dawson, they're not bad players. They're not top 22 players of any side in the whole comp by any stretch. They would not get a game anywhere else, but they're going to be good AFL players.
Yeah, just a couple more off seasons, and we should be looking dangerous.
Yeah, we'll have a very balanced list after 2 more off seasons.
Our third question comes from Dale Snelling. He says, "Hi Shane, Tom, love your work, legends." Thanks, Dale. With the early trade speculation starting to come up to get experience in, what are your guys' thoughts on who we should actively chase that are maybe looking for more opportunity or out of contract? A few I've seen pop up are Dalhouse, Lloyd, Tyson, Miles, Wallace, maybe Josh Thomas, if Lynch goes. Is there any others worth pursuing? I'd love some big names, but realistically, we're probably looking at these types of guys to move north. And so, what do you think about that, Tom?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question because, no one's going to come out and say, "Oh yeah, I want to go to the Suns," especially with the team not doing so well, especially with the Lynch speculation. But at the end of the day, they're professional footballers. If there's someone out there like say a Dalhouse who's going to turn 26 by the end of this season, he's exactly the kind of age profile that we need to be looking at to throw him a 3-year contract, 5 years if he demands it, and see how he goes, because we know he can be an elite player. We know he's out of contract. We know he's not even particularly in vogue with his current team. They don't always consider him to be top 22 potential at this stage of his career, but see how he goes. Another person who I like from the Bulldogs is Mitch Wallace, and the reason for that is he's said to be a high character person, and we need more of those. We need high character people around the club, someone who's got a bit of experience, and of course he's won a grand final. So how many players have we got in the team who've won a grand final? I don't think. Richatelli might have been in the Lions list when they lost a grand final. That's about as close as it gets, isn't it?
Yeah, I agree with you on both Dalhouse and Wallace. I really like those Bulldogs boys. I think they can provide a lot to the Suns. Yes, they've had a poor year or poor couple of years, but they still have the experience and the knowledge that we need as a football club. So I really think they can contribute. The other ones that have been linked to us that I'm keen on would be Jake Lloyd from Sydney. I think he could be a real asset to the club. Also, Jared McVeigh. Yes, he's probably only got a year left in him, if that. But playing a Luke Hodge style role would be really beneficial for us. More so for our younger mids and blokes like Scrimshaw and Kolodjasny, just guiding those guys through, even if he ends up playing half a dozen games in the NEFL. It's still really strong leadership that the club needs to help drive culture. And the other one that's on the Swans list is Nick Newman. I really like what he does. He hasn't been able to break into the Swans team despite playing stellar football in the NEFL. And word is he's really close with Stuart Dew, and that was one of the reasons why he was getting regular game time last year. So there's a good chance that we could entice Newman up, and that's a good sort of player that we can play anywhere from off the half back to a wing, to even right in the middle of right in the guts of the midfield.
Yeah, well, there's a marked difference to the way he played last year to the way he played this year, and he had 20 games last year and just the 3 games this year, and doesn't look even close to getting back into the team. Although you never know. I think that he's probably is just a bit younger than Dalhouse, but he still fits that age profile. We really need somebody who's sort of going to be turning 26 next year. So he's exactly the age he's going to be the same sort of age and profile as guys like Swallow and Lyons and Lynch if he stays, and May and Thompson. So he definitely fit. The Swans keep producing these guys, don't they? That he didn't debut until he's 24 years of age, but once he sort of clocked up 20 games in the season, and played finals. I'm pretty sure he would have thought, and most people would have thought, that he was going to play a full season this year, but it just hasn't been the case at all. So these are the guys to target. And, he wouldn't even cost that much, would he?
No, he wouldn't. A late pick we probably wouldn't even use. Guys like Tyson and Miles, I don't mind them, but I just struggle to see where they would fit into our side, considering we've got guys like Brody that are only now just starting to get games, and he still hasn't been able to string together consecutive games this year, Brody. But I just don't see a spot for them on the team. If we were going to go for a big midfielder type player, I think we'd be better off going after more of an outside, flashier player. I know it's unrealistic, but it would be great to get someone like Andrew Gaff.
Yeah. I mean, what did he get on the weekend? 40 touches. And I think he had 26 by half time or something ridiculous. Look, it's not out of the realms. We should be talking to his manager. We should be sort of saying, look, you've played out there. Well, this is just a different frontier, and you've played in front of massive crowds, and you've had all that experience. Well, how about you come to a club where you're going to be immediately into the leadership group, and just like Ablett did, you're going to be teaching guys you're going to be playing with, and that could suit him. And I mean, how much would you pay him? You would open the checkbook, wouldn't you?
Pay him over $1 million, 1.2 or something like that.
So he's going to get more than Dusty, or Dusty money.
Yeah.
Then who else can stump that up?
Yeah.
I mean, he's going to be a hot property. Look, a lot of players who we might have talked about a month or two ago have been snapped up, and that's they've been tied up in contracts. So the list is growing smaller, and we've just got to land one.
Yeah. Well, I do have 2 left field choices. What do you think of these guys? Westhoff from Port Adelaide and Fasolo from Collingwood.
Either one of those. I'm not ageist. I don't believe. I like your McVeigh call as well. I don't believe that getting a guy in their 30s. It depends on the guy. If it's been someone who's spent a whole lot of their career on the sidelines with injury, well, even then, ruckmen go well in that sort of age of their career. So, go for both of those guys would be terrific.
Yeah, I just think Westhoff plays that role that ideally we want Sam Day to play, but due to injury and form, he just doesn't seem to be able to consistently do it, playing a role and impacting both forward and back. And Fasolo is just over 180 centimetres. He can be a good third tall forward, not tall, but a good third forward, and be really damaging. He's really good in the air as well, so he can actually play as a third tall. We do play Essendon this week, Saturday night at Metricon Stadium. Let's quickly just, who do you think will win, and what needs to be done for the Suns to at least be competitive?
This is a should-win game for the Suns, but looking at the ladder position and the form line, the Bombers were good against Collingwood. They just, they lost a good game. They're going to come and really give it a shake, and we need to play the best possible football that we can play, and show the Metricon crowd who, it's possible that this is going to be another instance where there's more black and red than there is red and gold. And so in order to be able to, woo some fans back to the club, and I read somewhere the other day that I think the club's membership might be getting up around 12,000 or something like that, which isn't bad for this crappy year with only 7 home games and whatnot. So, I give them the chance, and I'll quickly just reiterate that the NEFL team plays the Giants, and because the NEFL team has to play all the other AFL NEFL teams 4 times. So there will be, as you mentioned, 3 AFL listed players coming back in for the NEFL team, and there'll also be a few Allies players who haven't been playing lately for the NEFL team, including Bailey Scott. So a lot of good reasons to be following the Suns this weekend. What do you reckon? You reckon the Bombers are going to put 100 points on us, or you reckon it's going to be a close one?
I don't think we'll win this game, to be honest. I don't think we're up to the level. The Bombers do play a very fast, uncontested style of football, completely the opposite of what we play. If we are to win or be competitive, we're going to have to really knuckle down defensively and keep the Bombers to a low score, as the Suns haven't scored much more than 60 points all year. So I think that's going to be the big telling point for us. But I'd love to be proven wrong and for us to, kick a margin close to 100 points and get the win that way. But I just can't see it happening. But I'll be at the game cheering on the boys. Not to the point where I lose my voice, but I'll need to find a good middle ground, because we need to support the boys and be louder than the opposition team. Prove that we are Gold Coast supporters and we're here to stay.
Yeah, absolutely. And looking at the weather forecast, it looks like it's going to be a nice sunny day, and but not too warm. You're going to have a bit of rain through the week, but that just means it'll be a beautiful pitch, and perfect day really for families to go out and watch a game of footy. It's hard to remain optimistic with this crew, but I do see some improvements in some areas having been made against the Pies and then against the Kangaroos, and I just think something's got to give. It could be one of those days where the boys just come out and put the first 30 points on the board and lead all day, which we've seen it before. We haven't seen it this year.
Okay, well, that's another episode of the GC Sunscast wrapped up. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for joining me, Tom.
Yep, great. I'll catch up with you next week, eh?
Yep, will do. Have a good day. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to another episode of the GC Sunscast. If you like what you hear, please get involved in our small community over on bigfooty.com on the Gold Coast board. Chat with myself, Sunners, and Tom, 17er, as well as dozens of other Gold Coast fans. You can reach me on Facebook or Twitter at 32bitshane, or email me 32bitshane@gmail.com with any queries. Leave a comment or review on iTunes and SoundCloud, or a donation on Patreon. Just search GC Sunscast. Donations are in US dollars and will go towards reliable tech and hosting the podcast, so listeners have access to our earlier episodes. Thanks again. Go Suns!